Hello, Pastor Will here for February 14th, 2021, with part 4 of my 166-part series, Better Know a Miracle. So far, we've covered 7 miracles in the other 3 parts that we've had. Today, I was going to cover 2 more miracles, one out of Exodus and one out of John, but I know that it would be too long, so we'll do John 2, 1 through 11 next week, the miracle of Jesus turning the water into wine. This week's is the miracle of undrinkable water becoming drinkable. So before we get into the text, let's remember in prayer people in the world who are lost. And I don't just mean in terms of salvation. I just mean they don't know what to do. They're overwhelmed. People who are lonely, they don't even have a friend. People who are scared, people who are ill. Let's remember them and let's pray that we have the courage and the grace to be like Christ and to go to these people and to go to the situations, the oppressive situations in our governments that are keeping people in these horrible conditions, and that we work to change things for the better as disciples of Jesus are called to do. Amen. So Exodus 15 verses 22 through 27. Then Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was called Marah. And the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it in the water, and the water became sweet or drinkable. There the Lord made for them a statute and an ordinance. He said, "If you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, and give heed to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that were brought to the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. So the setting for this text is the Hebrews have just been freed from slavery in Egypt by God through the leadership of Moses. They were running away from Egypt. Pharaoh has figured out, oh my God, they're not just going to be gone for a little while, a little vacation and come back, like Moses made it sound. They're not coming back. So Pharaoh sends his armies to go out and retrieve them and bring them back. And at that moment, the Hebrews are blocked by the Red Sea and they cannot go any farther. And the armies of Egypt are coming after them. And they realize, we're in a tight spot. And at that moment, Moses, through the power of God, channeled through him, parts the Red Sea, and the Hebrews escape through the dry seabed to the other side, and then the waves crash in and destroys the army of Moses, enabling the Hebrews' great escape. And so now, after all that excitement, and after months of trying to get away, they're finally in the wilderness. They're finally away, but they're in the wilderness. And they're wondering what's going to happen next. What do we do next? We have nothing but what we brought with us. And in the Bible, the wilderness is a metaphor for a place where life is not properly supported. You don't have the usual reliable, everyday, ordinary things that we depend on for life. Such as if you were homeless, you'd be in the wilderness. You wouldn't have a normal place to go to the bathroom. You wouldn't be able to have resources to get something to drink or to eat. You wouldn't have a place of good shelter to keep you safe from the elements. You know, you're in the wilderness, even if you're in the middle of New York City. That's the wilderness. It's a place where life support or the risk that we face in life are higher. Life is a higher risk. Living in the midst of COVID-19, that's the wilderness. And in the Bible as well, the wilderness is a place where people don't expect to meet God. You know, if people were sent out from the city, sent out beyond the city walls and sent into the wilderness, they were being thrown away by society, and it was assumed by God, because God wasn't to be found in the wilderness. That's a desolate place. But in the Bible, it's in the wilderness, in the chaos, in the most desolate places where God comes to people. That's where God is. So it is in this inhospitable place that the Hebrews find themselves, and they're wondering, how are we going to survive? What are we going to do? And they come to this oasis in the wilderness, Marah, a place where there's some water. But to their dismay, the water is not drinkable. It's bad. It's bad water. It's stagnant. They cannot drink it. The water is bitter. That's what Marah means, bitter. If you remember in the book of Ruth, Naomi describes herself to her friends in her hometown. Don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Marah, because I'm bitter, because I've lost my husband and my 2 children, and life hasn't turned out the way I had hoped. Now, water was a precious, precious thing in ancient Egypt, in the Middle East. If you live in a dry desert country, you have a great appreciation for water. If you've ever been without water and become very thirsty, you have a great appreciation for water. We're going to learn more and more in the years to come in our world and in this country how valuable water is and how much we're going to be exploited for that water. In 2020 of December, water was traded on the stock exchange, the exchange for water now. Water has become very rare in parts of the world and in parts of this country, and it's now being traded on the stock exchange as a commodity like oil or gold or wheat. That's not good, people, because water is now seen as a need and not a right. A need is something that you can sell for as much as you can get for it. A right is something that you are given for free, a human right. Water is no longer regarded as a human right. Municipalities are making it illegal for people to collect rainwater. That's just wrong. That's a sin. Rainwater is freely given. People should be able to collect it. But municipalities all over this country have made it illegal. Nestle, the company Nestle, is probably one of the most corrupt businesses in the world. And one of their great corruptions is how they exploit water. They take clean, good drinking water from communities who sorely need it. And then there's not enough water for the communities. They do this in the United States. They're doing it in California. They did it in Pennsylvania. They're doing it in third world countries all over, leaving people without the resources they need for life. They traffic humans. They have slaves in other countries. They have children slaves in their cocoa business to make chocolate. And they exploit new mothers who don't know anything or who are uneducated in this country and in others. They'll get water and they'll bottle it. You know, bottled water companies don't make anything but bottles. Water can't be manufactured. It can only be given and received. Water can't be invented. It's already been invented. It is. But they take the water, they steal it from the land, they steal it from the people, they bottle it, and then they sell these bottles for $2 to people in third world countries who are only making pennies a day, cents a day, less than $1 a day, in which $2 is a huge investment. And they're falsely educating new mothers and telling them that new mothers should only breastfeed for up to 6 months, and then it's best for the new mothers to change to formula. And guess what? Nestle owns about 99% of all the formula in the world. It's bought up all the other companies, and it owns all the baby formula. And so they say only breastfeed for about 6 months and then change the formula, baby formula. And guess what? We provide that. But you have to mix it with water. It's $2 a bottle. And then people are so poor they can't afford, they're stingy with the water. And then the baby suffers. The baby's not getting all the nutrients it needs. And the whole world suffers. Don't use Nestle products. I love Nestle Toll House cookies, but I don't support them anymore. As many times as I can, I do not support Nestle. They influence the World Water Council to that water is not a human right, but a human need. So that tells me the World Water Council is also corrupt. Because why else would they have gone along with that. Something was exchanged. So the people of the Hebrews, rather, are in the wilderness without water, and without water, people die. It's as simple as that. Without water, people die. So what do? They do what people always do when situations don't turn out the way we hope. They complain. And they complain against Moses. They blame their leader, the very man who gave his life, begging Pharaoh to let them go, trying all manner of resort things to get Pharaoh to let them go, and then finally tricks Pharaoh and leaves them to freedom. And then Moses also doesn't allow them to be annihilated or taken back as prisoners by the armies of Pharaoh. And they complain against against Moses and say, what are we going to do now? You don't have a plan? This is the best you can do? You led us all out here into the wilderness to die? And Moses, in turn, complains to God, which is good. Complaining to God, at least you're communicating with God. And so God hears Moses' complaints, and God acts. And God shows Moses a piece of wood. And Moses recognizes there's something to this. I guess it would be pretty incredible to find a piece of wood in the desert. And so Moses picks up the wood, chunks it into the pool of water, and the water becomes drinkable or sweet, as the text says. When I read that, I wonder how many times on a daily basis does God show me something like God showed Moses a piece of wood, and I refuse to recognize the possibilities in it. I refuse to recognize opportunities and things God shows me because I'm so caught up in myself or even in my complaints or worries. I think God shows us things every day and shows us people every day, and we just don't see opportunity there for new life. So the people, the Hebrews, drink the water, and they're given new life in the desert, in the wilderness. They're restored to life. And this is a text about that, moving from bondage to restoration, moving from near death to life. And that's what it means to walk with God and to be with God, to be a restored people, to be healed. So why did God rescue the Hebrews by providing sweet water? And for that matter, why did God rescue the Hebrews from their bondage in Israel? Well, we're told in the beginning of chapter of the book of Exodus that God heard their cries and had compassion for them. And that's one reason God has compassion for them. When my children were little and I would take them to the movies, to the theater, I would always wear a white shirt, a very white shirt, and take them to the theater. And this was in case when the lights went down and it got dark, I wanted them to know their daddy is right here with them. I wanted my boys to know, I'm here with you, don't worry. You can see this white and know I'm here. Or if there's a scary part in the movie, they can look and they can say, oh, our dad's here right in the dark, and they can be reassured. And then in this text, I see God reassuring the Hebrews, hey, I've led you this far. I'm not going to let you down. You can trust me. I am your God and I love you. So that's one reason God, I think, provides the sweet water at the oasis of Marah to reassure the people. But there's more to it than that. God also has expectations for the Hebrews. God expects something. God's going to love them no matter what. And it's not an if-then. If you do this, then I'll do this. It's not that. God's always going to be gracious. But God still expects something from the Hebrews. And so God responds with what God expects in verse 26 and says, if you live the way God has called you to live, you will be healed beyond your wildest imaginations. You will know a full, true life. So we see that being rescued from bondage for the Hebrews does not leave them free to do whatever they want to do. Well, they do have that freedom, but God is hoping that they will want more out of life, more of the fullness of life. And this comes only from a true allegiance to God in God's way. And we see that living in God's way of salvation requires a new allegiance to God alone. Now, later on in the Exodus, we'll see that the Hebrews were willing to go back to Pharaoh. They were willing to go back and live in bondage. That means they were willing to still be loyal to Pharaoh, even though Pharaoh couldn't care less about them. And you see that in a lot of countries today. People are so loyal to their country for what? The country uses them in time of war as cannon fodder, uses them for other things to exploit them. People are fiercely loyal. It's really demazing, not amazing, demazing. Why? Brainwashing, propaganda, peer pressure, whatever. Israel is now bound to God, to God's will and God's purpose. Israel's single purpose in life is to do God's commands. That's what God is saying. Hey, I rescued you and I hope that you want more. I hope you want true life. We've heard the story of churches, pastors who all came together, 3 church pastors, let's say a United Methodist pastor, a Baptist pastor, and a Presbyterian pastor, let's say that. And they all came together. That's not how it goes. I'm going to go with that, though. I'll just make this up. And they all had this one common complaint. There were too many pigeons in their steeples. And the pigeons were causing a mess, droppings on the sidewalks and all kind of things. And the people were complaining. This was just so unsightly and unhealthy. Let's complain about pigeons instead of the exploitation of the poor. This will give us something good to complain about. So they complain about it, and the pastors meet together for coffee every morning, and they're like, what are we going to do about these pigeons? And then the Presbyterian says, well, I got some guys with BB guns and tried to shoot them down, but it just didn't work, and the pigeons are still here. Still, it's causing so much stress. And then the Baptist guy goes, well, we tried hiring an extermination company to get them out, and it worked temporarily, but they're all back. I don't know what to do. And then my Methodist pastor said, all of ours are gone. They said, and they're not coming back. And the Baptist and the Presbyterian said, oh my, how did you accomplish that? And the United Methodist said, I just took some water up there and sprinkled on them all and baptized them, and they never came back to the church building. Having total allegiance to God and God alone is counter to American Christian religion, where the typical belief is that if we can just manage to get baptized and get saved from hell, that we're free and clear to live life however we want. And we think that that means being allegiant to God. We can have multiple allegiances, we say, even if they counter each other, even if they are totally opposed to each other, such as one, allegiance to Jesus says, love your enemies, and allegiance to the country says, kill your enemies. We can do both, we think. And God will forgive us if we ask nicely, and God will never, and we'll always be safe, or saved, if you want to put it that way. That's a pretty good gig, pretty good. It's wrong. A lot of people are going to learn that too late. God says if you really hear and really pay attention to God's intention for creation, where everyone gets along and takes care of each other, if you really want freedom, you'll live by God's standards and you'll know what it's like to be fully restored and healed. Again, it's not if then, not if you obey me, then you'll be healed. God is pointing out things were different in Egypt, and you've got to make a clean break from Egypt and follow only me. You've got to make a clean break from your nation's standards and follow only the ways of God, where there are no borders in the world. God is making clear, I am not one who brings calamity upon you, but healing. I am a healer. I am one who heals you. Another way, I am your healer. I am your doctor, if you will. I take care of you. But you've got to break from your old ways, your old habits that are causing so much pain in your life if you want to truly know healing. So as healer, God restores people, God restores communities and all of creation to their rightful status of health as creatures loved by their Creator and who are responsive to their healer. Later on, if you get to the New Testament in the book of Luke, chapter 10, verse 9, Jesus gives this work of healing to his disciples. And we tend to think that healing just means some kind of physical ailment that's healed, a broken bone, oh, I'll heal you. No. Healing is about creation being healed, communities, the whole world being healed, where the people of God help enact this healing by having one allegiance to one way of life. And that is what God intends for creation, for all of creation, that all of creation be cared for and loved. And it's a critique of systems and not living your life continuing to support corrupt systems such as Nestle or such as any form of, whether it be of government or of business or whatever, that exploits creation, that exploits people. Just think if the church truly trusted God and acted like God, what God intends for creation, how different the world would be. The remedy to so much of the ills in life is not found in our current system, but within God's kingdom of love and justice and peace through nonviolence for all people. That requires a break with all other allegiances we have. And when you look at the John text next week, you'll see a break with the allegiance Jesus has to his mama. When his mama comes to him and asks something of him, and Jesus says, woman, what's that to me or to you? And it's showing, my allegiance is to God only, not even to my family. It's a break with our culture and heritage, if you will, and taking on a new culture and heritage, that of the way of God. And what's the consequence of this? Well, we see that the Hebrews, they drink this new sweet water and then they go on their journey, and the next oasis they find has 12 oases, 12 pools of water and over 70 palm trees. It's paradise. And the text is showing us that God's promises can be counted upon. And you can live life to the fullness, even in the wilderness. Even when the rest of the world thinks you're in the wilderness, you're not. You're in the briar patch. You're home, dependent on God to sustain you. So making the break from prior allegiances means being able to drink the sweet water that God provides in abundance, and the here and now. And then we remember that God is present in the here and now, giving us the water that is needed for life. So, in this Exodus text, we see that expecting salvation from God means to totally reorient our lives and reorder our lives so that we can know the sweetness of truly living in the world. That is my prayer for each of you this day. Amen.